Lesson 15, I will fluently use decomposition to subtract multiple times. So we are going to continue to decompose numbers or unbundle numbers to be able to subtract. We began subtracting in just two places. In lesson 14, we ended up where we were having to unbundle or decompose in at least up to three places. And in this lesson, we're going to decompose up to multiple places. All right, so go ahead and get out your problem set, and I want you to go ahead and write your name at the top, and let's take a look at number 1. It says use standard algorithm to solve the problems below. I'd like for you to just take a minute and see how much of A and B that you can do, and then I want you to go ahead and pause the video, see how much of A and B you can do by yourself, and then come back and we'll check them together. If you get stuck, you can always press play. Okay, let's take a look at A. So the first thing I did is I had to see if I was ready to subtract. Well, in the ones place, I was ready to subtract. But in the tens place, I was not ready to subtract. So I had to come over and decompose this 100 or unbundle it, and that left me with 5 hundredths and 16 ones. Then that left me to where I was not able to subtract in the hundreds place. So I had to come over to the thousands and decompose this thousand, and that left 0 thousands and gave me 15 hundredths. Well, then that left me where I could not subtract in the thousands place. So this is where it got a little bit tricky. When I went to the 10,000s place, there was nothing to unbundle. I had to go to the 100,000s place. So that left 0 100,000s, 10 10,000s. Then I was able to unbundle one 10,000 to make 10,000s. Then all I had to do was just subtract. So there was a lot to think through. I really think that if you'll take the time to make sure that you're able to subtract in every place before you start subtracting, once you get all of this in order, then the subtraction becomes much easier. So my answer here was 9,980. Okay, so let's take a look at B. Again, I'm able to subtract in the ones, but I'm not able to subtract in the tens. So I come over and I'm going to decompose the 100, and that's going to leave me with 16 tens. But I'm unable to subtract in the hundreds. So I'm going to come to the thousands, and I'm going to decompose 1,000. That leaves no thousands, and now I have 15 hundredths. So again, I cannot subtract in the thousands place. When I go to the 10,000s, there's nothing. So I go all the way to the 100,000s. When I decompose that 100,000, that leaves no 100,000s and 10 10,000s. Now I'm able to decompose one of those to leave me with 9 10,000s and 10,000s. So now I'm ready to subtract. So I get 0, 8, 6, 1, 9. So I have 91,680. So this lesson is really going to test whether or not you completely understand when you need to unbundle and when you need to not. And when I say unbundle and decompose mean the same thing. Decompose means to break something down into smaller parts, and that's the same thing that you're doing when you unbundle. You're taking a larger unit and you're breaking it down into smaller parts. It's the same thing when you decompose. You're taking a larger unit and breaking it down into smaller parts. All right, so let's take a look at C. I'd like for you to attempt to do C and D by yourself and then come back and we will check them together. If you get stuck, press play and I will walk you through them. Okay, so hopefully you were able to get some of this done by yourself. If not, let me walk you through it. So are we able to subtract in the ones? And the answer is no. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to decompose in the tens, and that leaves 5 tens and 11 ones. Am I able to subtract in the tens? Yes. So now I'm going to go to the hundreds. Am I able to subtract in the hundreds? No. So I go to the thousands. I'm going to decompose this 1,000. That leaves 1,000, and now I have 15 hundredths. Am I able to subtract in the thousands? No. So I'm going to decompose the 10,000. That leaves 3 10,000s, and now I have 11 thousands. Am I able to subtract in the 10,000s? No. So I'm going to come over here and decompose 100,000. That leaves 100,000, and now I have 13 10,000s. Now I'm ready to subtract. So I have 9, 5, 8, 7, 9, and 1. 197,859. Let's take a look at D. Am I ready to subtract in the ones? No. So I'm going to go to the tens. I'm going to decompose this 6, and that leaves 5 tens, and now I have 11 ones. Am I ready to subtract in the tens? No. I'm going to decompose this 100. That leaves 4 hundreds, and now I have 15 tens. Am I ready to subtract in the hundreds? No. I'm going to come to the thousands, and that leaves 1,000, and now I have 14 hundreds. Am I ready to subtract in the thousands? No, so I'm going to decompose in the 10,000. That leaves 3 10,000s and 11 thousands. Am I ready to subtract in the 10,000s? No, so I'm going to decompose this 100,000. That leaves 100,000, and I have 13 10,000s. That was a lot of decomposing. We decomposed every single place. Now we're ready to subtract, so I have 4, 7, 5, 7, 6, and 1. So that leaves 167,574. All right, so let's take a look at E and F. Now you did problems like this in your Zern lesson, and you learned that when you have zeros, it's no different than when you don't have zeros. But there is a little bit of a difference whenever you're getting ready to unbundle. You have to keep moving over until you find something to unbundle. So let's take a look at E. If you feel confident that you were able to do these pretty easily on Zern, go ahead and be brave and pause that video. If you can't do it yet, then you can stay along with me and I'll do it with you, okay? All right, so let's take a look at E. So am I ready to subtract in the ones? Yes. The tens? Yes. The hundreds? Yes. What about the thousands? No. So when I go to the 10,000s, there's nothing to decompose. There's nothing in the 100,000s. I have to come all the way over here to this millions. And now I have no millions, but I do have 10 100,000s. But I still can't subtract in the thousands. So I have to decompose 100,000. That leaves 900,000s. Now I have 10 10,000s. But I still am not ready to subtract in the thousands. So I have to decompose a 10,000. And that leaves 9 10,000s. And now I have 10 thousands. Now I'm ready to subtract. So I have 0, 0, 0, 8, 0, and 4. So that's 408,000. If you feel a little bit more confident about doing F now that you've done E with me, go ahead and pause the video and try to do it. But if you're still not confident yet, then you can stick with me and I'll talk you through F as well. Okay, are we ready to subtract in the ones? Yes. What about the tens? Yes. What about the hundreds? No. So we have to go all the way over to the millions before we can find something to decompose. So I'm going to decompose this million. Now I have no millions, but now I have 10 100,000s. But I still can't subtract in the hundreds. So I'm going to decompose that 100,000. Now I have 900,000s and 10 10,000s. I've got to decompose a 10,000. So now I have 9 10,000s and 10,000s. Am I ready to subtract? Not yet. I've got to decompose one more time. So that leaves 9 thousands and 10 hundreds. Am I ready to subtract now? Yes, I am. Okay, so I have 0, 0, 5, 7, 0, and 4. So this time I have 407,500. All right, so we've got G and we've got H. So I'd like for you to try to pause the video and do both of these by yourself, and then let's come back and check together. Okay, so let's take a look at G. So the first thing I had to do is go and see if I was ready to subtract. And I was not ready to subtract in the ones, so I had to decompose in the tens so that I would have 18 ones. Then I was not ready to subtract in the tens, so I had to decompose 100 so that I could subtract in the tens. I didn't have to do anything in the hundreds because I am ready to subtract here. But when I got to the thousands, I was not ready to subtract, so I had to go all the way to the 100,000s and decompose a 10,000 and a 100,000 so that I could subtract in the thousands. Once I got finished with that, all I had to do was subtract, and that left me with 8,089. Okay, so let's take a look at H. So H was very similar to the problem that we did a few problems ago where we had 1 million. This time it was 600,000. So I was not ready to subtract in the ones, and I had to go all the way over to the 100,000s and decompose in every single place until I was finally ready to subtract in the ones. And then when I subtracted, I have 7,431. All right, so let's take a look at some application problems. The directions say use tape diagrams and the standard algorithm to solve the problems below. So they're telling you what to draw here. They're telling you to use a tape diagram in your drawing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to use that RDWW process, but our drawing this time, they're telling us to draw a tape diagram. So David is flying from Hong Kong to Buenos Aires. The total flight distance is 11,472 miles. If the plane has 7,793 miles left to travel, how far has it already traveled? Well, I know that I have to create a tape diagram here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a tape diagram. And I want you to take a minute, I want you to pause the video and think about how are you going to label this tape diagram. And then come back and let's see if you labeled it the same way that I did. Okay, so you can see that I divided the tape diagram into two parts. The total represents the total flight distance from Hong Kong to Buenos Aires. 7,793 represents how far the plane has left to travel. And M is going to represent how far it has already traveled. And I don't know that number yet. But if I have the whole and I have one part, then I'm going to use what kind of math to find the missing part? I'm going to subtract, right? I'm going to take 11,472 and I'm going to subtract 7,793. I'd like for you to finish this problem. I'd like for you to finish our word problem, or excuse me, our number sentence. We wrote a number sentence, and then I want you to write a word sentence answering the question, and then let's come back and check and see if we have the correct answer. Okay, so let's check our subtraction. So when I subtracted, I was not ready to subtract in any place, so I had to decompose in every place. And then when I was ready to subtract, I had 3,679. So the plane has already traveled 3,679 miles. All right, let's take a look at problem number 3. Again, we're going to use that RDWW process. And they've already told us that we're going to draw a tape diagram. I'd like for you to pause the video now and see if you can do as much of this problem by yourself. If you're unable to do this problem all by yourself yet, that's okay. You can press play and I'll talk you through it, but I want you to try to do as much of it as you can on your own. Okay, so hopefully you were able to complete some of this by yourself. So because tank B was the larger of the two tanks, this would represent our total. Tank A holds this much, and then what was left over would be how much less tank A is than tank B. So this represents tank A, and then the total would be tank B. So this missing part would represent how much more tank B holds than tank A, or in reverse, how much less tank A holds than tank B. So in order to find the answer, I just labeled this G for gallons. I had to subtract. And when I subtract, I had to decompose in the 10,000s and the 100,000s so that I was able to subtract in the thousands. I didn't have to do anything to the hundreds, tens, and ones. So my word sentence is tank A holds 227,367 gallons less than tank B. Okay, this is our last problem. So again, we're going to use the RDWW process. We're going to read, we're going to draw. We know we're going to draw a tape diagram. We're going to write a number sentence, and we're going to write a word sentence. So again, I'd like for you to try to read this and draw and solve the problem all by yourself. If you are still unable to do this yet, that's okay. You can come back and I will walk you through it. All right, so Mark had $25,081 in his bank account on Thursday. On Friday, he added his paycheck to the bank account, and he then had $26,010 in the account. What was the amount of Mark's paycheck? So here's going to be our tape diagram, and in our tape diagram, we have a total. It says here that this is the total of Mark's bank account. So that's going to represent the whole, $26,010. And he started with $25,081, and we want to know what his paycheck was. So I'm going to just label that P, because when you add Mark's paycheck to what he had in his bank account on Thursday, then you'll get the total of what he had in his bank account on Friday. So to find this missing piece, we're going to use what? Subtraction. That's right. So we've got 26,010 minus 25,081. So, am I able to subtract in the ones place? No, so I'm going to decompose in the tens, and that leaves 0 tens and 10 ones. Am I able to subtract in the tens place? No, but there are no hundreds to decompose, so I have to go to the thousands, and that's going to leave 5 thousands, and now I have 10 hundreds, but I still am not ready to subtract in the tens place, so I have to decompose 100, and that leaves 9 hundreds, and now I have 10 tens. So I'm ready to subtract in the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, and in the 2000s. So 10 minus 1 is 9, 10 minus 8 is 2, and 9 minus 0 is 9. And 5 minus 5 is 0, and 2 minus 2 is 0, so we have $929. This is where I wrote my number sentence. Now I'm ready to answer the question. What was the amount of Mark's paycheck? Mark's paycheck was $929. So in this lesson, we had to do a lot of decomposing in order to be able to subtract. Just remember, do not begin to subtract until you go through every place value to make sure that you're ready to subtract. That will help you to not get confused. Good luck on your exit ticket.